Howdy everyone, I read 10 books in January and Kenobi and I are gonna get into it. I took a little bit of a sabbatical from reading, I guess you could say. I didn't read at all from August until January. My 2022 goal was to make it a huge point to dedicate a large part of my time to reading, and I think I've done a really good job at that. I wanted to start off smooth and steady, so I did read quite a few smaller books this month. However, we did start off strong with Tender is the Flesh. This book was 211 pages and I rated it 4 stars. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. I can definitely see the point of this book was to make the reader largely uncomfortable, and it accomplished it. Okay, so when discussing the plot of this book, to keep it more of the not so gory description, I will say this book is about the main character, Marcos, who is a sort of like veterinary type of person, but a virus infects all of the animals on Earth, making them extremely poisonous to humans. Even if you were to so much as get scratched by a dog, then you were pretty much done for at this point. So society developed from going from eating cattle and meat to breeding and slaughtering humans as a way of protein for them. They don't call these individuals humans, they're cattle. They're essentially heads of cattle that are bred for consumption, and they do this in a variety of different ways. Like, they have, the scientists or whatever you want to call them have developed a way, just like we have for chickens, to make them grow quicker. And so you have like those types of cattle, and then you have FGP cattle, which is first generation pure, which is like the traditional way of like how humans are born, and they're not modified at all. So there are 2 different ways that you can breed these humans, and Marcos, the main character, is like essentially almost like a COO in a way. Like, he's one step down from like the factory's like main person. Marcos is experiencing a lot of stress, so the factory owner gifts him a first generation pure head of cattle like as a gift to him, and these are worth, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. So then the story progresses from there, from, you know, how he's feeling dealing with the change in society. Do 100% check the trigger warnings for this book. It is very, very descriptive. A+ for the author for that one, because wow, the descriptions are there. She doesn't fault on that. If you are somebody who is not easily grossed out, I would 100% say to give this book a read. It definitely makes you think of just how far humans are willing to go, gloss over and sweep things under the rug. It was really mind-boggling for me. So I gave this book 4 stars. Moving on, I read Womb by Duncan Ralston. This book was 138 pages and I gave it 3 stars.
Wow.
This book was wild. So it's about this main character, whose name I honestly cannot remember, who is staying at this really like raggedy hotel, or more of like a motel-ish area, and he's staying in the room, and a lot of things have happened within this room, a ton of different stories. He calls on a service to get a hooker sent to his room, and while they're together, he's telling her everything that has happened in this room before. I would 100% say definitely, again, check the trigger warnings for this book, because there are talks of attempted abortion and abuse. I would say that if that's something that could affect you, then I would probably skip this one. This was a very short read. The plot twist at the end, well, I wouldn't really call it a plot twist as much as I would just say what this book was leading up to, I didn't really expect. I wasn't really sure where the story was going, because the main character is essentially talking to this hooker the whole time about like what had happened in the room, and you're following all of the stories. I think there's like 3 or 4 of them. And then the ending comes and he's like,
and this information, and you're like,
buddy, chill. The ending was wild. It was a really short read, so I think if you can handle graphic descriptions and the trigger warnings aren't going to bug you, I would say to definitely give this one a go. The 3rd book that I read in January was The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which was such a funny book. I was actually dying laughing. I gave this book 3.5 stars, and it's only 64 pages. It's not really a spoiler because it comes in like the first couple pages of the book. So the father goes to like the infirmary to like essentially like pick up his baby, and the nurse looks at him and is like,
"Sir, get your man-child out of my infirmary."
And the dad is just like,
What are you talking about? I just had a baby.
she's like,
No, absolutely not. That is a grown-ass man.
and so the imagery just had me dying laughing because all I could picture was this grown man sitting in like one of those infirmary bassinets, just like.
What's up, bro? Can I go home now?
If you guys don't know anything about this book, it's about somebody who ages backwards. So they're born essentially this old person, and then through their life they're aging back to being an infant. And it was, again, a really short read. It was 64 pages. It's just a classic little short story, and I had a ton of fun reading it. It was just, just an average, 3.5 star for me. If you're just waiting around and need something really quick to read, then I would say definitely give this one a go. And I had a fun time. So moving on to the next book. Are you eating? Kenobi on the table over here, eating his lunch.
Hi.
And he's back. The next book that I read was actually the longest book of the month, which was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book was 389 pages and I gave it 4 stars. I had quite a few 4-star reads this month. We'll talk about those obviously later in the video. But I had a really fun time reading this book. I found it very easy to get through the stories because it goes from when she was a girl through her entire life in the stories of her being a Hollywood film star. So she is telling her life through her marriages, and the subplot of this book is Monique is doing like a Evelyn tells all kind of thing, like Evelyn's nearing the end of her life and is finally, divulging into everything that happened to her. So instead of people having what they perceive to be the idea of who Evelyn is and what she did in her life and the choices that she made, she is essentially being like, I'm setting the record straight before I pass and y'all are gonna listen to me. And so that was a super fun, like bad bitch moment of like, you don't get to tell me who I am. This is what the truth is. And if you don't like it, you can
Get out of here.
So that was a really cool POV to read through because you have Monique in her monologue of like who she thinks Evelyn is and her admiration for somebody who's gone through so much in their life, and then you switch to Evelyn's POV of through her life and you're like, wow, holy crap. So it's a really good read. I enjoyed it. I don't want to say too much more about it because either chances are you have read it and you liked it or disliked it, or you want to read it and you've also heard
everybody else on the planet talk about it.
So moving on. The 5th book that I read this month was Karen Slaughter's Blonde Hair, Blue Eyes, which I gave 4 stars and has 67 pages. If I could recommend any one book for anyone to read, especially if you're a man, this month, it would be this book.
Again, if you're a man, read this book.
So it follows Julia Carroll. She's a college student and there are women going missing in her college town. She works for a local newspaper, like a college reporter paper, and she's trying to tell her superiors, who are all men, hey, all of these girls are going missing, we should definitely look into it or at least write about it. I've noticed that this one homeless woman that I know because she volunteers at a shelter, she's gone missing. And then I know of this other girl who she's gone missing as well. What are we going to do about it? We have to help them. We have to look for the man who took them and find them. And all of these men are just
Statistically, it is, not even relevant.
They're literally mansplaining abduction statistics to a college girl who fits in that statistic of, she is young and a female and blonde and beautiful, and those are the type of things that at least this specific abductor is looking for. And they're literally telling her to her face
No, sorry.
So she is set out to discover who's taking these women, XYZ. So I think the ending of this book is perfect. And I, again, feel like if you are a man and you've never experienced what it is or what it feels like to walk down a street late at night, walking back to your dorm, walking to your car, walking in or out of a store at that time of night to your vehicle, if you've never sensed a fear, then I urge you to read this book because I appreciated the way it describes you know, women have to, well, they don't have to, but they feel as they have to hold their keys in between their fingers when they're walking, carry bear mace on them, carry a taser on them, some sort of weapon, because in the back of our minds, all of us fit into a, will somebody take me? Will somebody snatch me up? Will somebody come and then just remove me from the census, essentially? And I know plenty of men in my life who have never even in the back of their minds thought about anything like that happening to them. And so I feel like if you're A, looking for a good story, B, looking for a short story, and C, of the male variety, then you should 100% give this book a read and then get back to me. Thanks. Moving on to the 6th book, I read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. Wow. This book was 99 pages. I gave it 4 stars reluctantly. I can't tell if this book is a 0 star or a 4 star. I really haven't made up my mind yet. Maybe it's a 5 star. I think we're gonna stick with 4 for now. If I could sum up this book in one phrase, it would be, oh my God, please don't eat that. And that's coming after I read Tender as the Flesh, okay? That's the best way I can explain this book. When I try to pinpoint an emotion, it's, oh my God, please don't put that in your mouth. That's gross. This book is about 2 women who meet in kind of like an early 2000s, like I Am chat room. One girl is trying to sell something. So they meet in this chat room. She's like, hey, I'm selling this thing. And the girl's like, hey, I want to buy that thing. And then so that happens. And like immediately within the first couple pages, they move to the I Am part of this discussion where they're starting to build a relationship and get to know each other. And one of the girls has money, one doesn't, and the one with money is like, hey, if you do these things for me, like I will reward you. So then they start those things, and every single page that I flipped, I'm like, okay, that was the worst part. It's not gonna get worse. And then I turned and I was like, okay, just kidding, no, that was the worst part. And then I turned again and it was like, okay, no, that was the worst part. Like it just kept getting, I don't want to say more and more ridiculous, but you're like,
where is this going?
Where is this book taking me? And I got to the ending and I got to the very last page and like, you know, it turns to the acknowledgments and I was like, what? I was equally as grossed out as I was wildly confused. And this book is so short that I read it in one sitting and the whole time I was like, crazy, literally craziness. But it was honestly, it was so good. There is very, very small amounts of animal abuse, I will say. She has to kill like a gecko. So if that's gonna bug you, maybe just skip a couple pages when it comes to that, or don't read it. That's up to you, but there is the death of a gecko in this book. Poor little thing. Other than that, super crazy. Definitely not where I thought the story was going, but here we are. The next book that I read was The Beauty. This book was horrible. I gave this book a 2 star. I'd love to tell you what this book was about. I honestly don't know. I was so confused the whole time. There's a lot of descriptive writing. What I got the gist was all of the women are dead and gone and now there's all just men. And obviously there's no women to give birth to any more people. So then there's just all dudes now. And then there's some graves and there's some really descriptive areas about mushrooms. And there are these mushrooms growing from all of the grave sites of these women. It gets super ghosty, it's super odd. I don't know. I hated this book. I almost DNF'd it, but it's only 99 pages, so I did finish it. But I don't recommend this book. I don't know. Go read the synopsis on Goodreads. I didn't like it. Moving on. The next book that I read was Gone to See the Riverman. This book. Oh my lord. What a roller coaster ride this was. Holy crap. I know I keep like looking off into the distance. It's because I'm sitting right in front of like my huge like double pane sliding doors, and there is a big lake right here, and there's always stuff that always catches my eye. Like there's pelicans, there's otters all the time just chilling in this lake. So I keep looking because shit keeps moving. But alright, let's talk about this book, Gone to See the Riverman. what
a roller coaster ride
this was. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. 4.5 stars. If I could describe this book in a phrase, it would be...
What the fuck, Lori?
So there's the main character, Lori, and her sister, Abby, who had an accident when she was a child that left her severely handicapped mentally and physically as well. So Lori has become pen pals with the local serial killer while he's in prison. And she's like, I just want to feel connected to this person. And he's like, well, if you really want to set yourself apart, you'll go do this task for me. And she's like,
Buddy, I'm not killing anybody.
that's what you're asking. He's like, no, 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 no. I simply need you to go like way deep in the woods to my family shack that's off the grid that the government doesn't even know about. Here's a map that I drew for you. I need you to go into my shack and retrieve a key and then take it down the river to the riverman for me. If you do that, then like, you know, chef's kiss to you, you'll be my number one, right? So you're going on this experience of her retrieving this key, bringing it to the riverman, and then the things that happen like immediately after that, and you're like, what? What? No, there's no way. But somehow the things still occur, the shit still goes down, and you're switching from timelines of like present day, them going to find the riverman, and then going back to their childhood so you can find out why Abby is the way that Abby is, like what her accident was. So switching in between those two timelines, every single like plot development that you get, you're just like, bitch, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Like, you want to see where the story's gonna take you, but the whole time you're like, this main character's kind of a bitch. Well, scratch the kind of part. Like, this girl is whack. W-A-C-K, whack. So I give this book 4 stars. I was so wrapped up in this story. I literally got the Kindle app on my phone and was at my husband's birthday dinner reading this book under the table at dinner. We went to the dinner with all of his family, so there was points in the night where like nobody was talking to me in this discussion, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna read this book. I literally couldn't put it down. So like I'm under the table, like scrolling on my phone, reading this book. That is how much I enjoyed it. It did get a little like ghosty paranormal at some points, and you were just kind of like, or at least for me, because I didn't expect that from this book. I find that the horror I lean more towards is like more realistic horror. I'm not a big fan of like the fairies and demons and ghosts kind of thing, because to me, when those elements come into a book, I can kind of dissociate a little bit. Just be like, oh, well, I'm not as scared anymore because I know that like those things aren't going to happen to me. I want horror to where if I'm reading it, I'm like, oh crap, like that could be me. Like I could be that POV. That's what scares me. And the same goes for like space themed horror, because that is also, I feel, realism in a way, because nobody truly knows what's happening out in space. I know what's happening here on Earth, at least for me. So when it gets to those kind of like different elements, they don't do it as much for me. I kind of just go, oh well, it's just a story at that point. But I gave Gone to See the Riverman 4 stars. I definitely recommend you giving it a read if you're in the mood for a really good story. There are some graphic, extremely graphic descriptions of bodies in this book, as well as some hard-hitting racism coming from the POV of the serial killer, and his descriptions of Asian women, really sickening. I found that more disturbing than the actual storyline, because I know that those things, in regard to some of the older wars that we've had, were true. And so, again, that goes back to what I was saying. Things that are true or have been known to be true scare me so much more than paranormal things do. So check a trigger warning and just kind of go from there. But I really did like this book. The next book that I read this month, and my only 5-star read for the whole month, was The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. Oh my god, I love her so much. This is her inauguration poem that she published. It's very, very short, 32 pages. I read it in one sitting. Holy crap, I absolutely adore Amanda Gorman. I love the gravitas in which she speaks and her passion that she's able to just elegantly portray her words into these stories, and oh my goodness. 5 stars. 5 stars all around. It's also the highest rated book that I've read this month. I think it has like a 4.54, something along those lines. I'll put it right here. I can't say enough good things. I can't say enough good things about how beautiful she is as a person, inside and out. Please go read this. Oh, so good. So, so, so good. Literally 10 out of 10. I don't know what else to say. Moving on to the next book, I read Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. So, this book was recommended to me not this year, not last year, not the year before that, but 7 years ago by my best friend E. This is her favorite book of all time. This is her, ride or die novel. She's read it, I can't even tell you how many times. This book is 277 pages, and I gave it no stars, all the stars, stars in between. I'm not sure. I literally cannot rate this book for the life of me. Because on one hand, I can interpret what this author is trying to do. I understand all of the metaphors. I understand why this is a high school curriculum. I understand the pressures of depression and loss and grief and anxiety and feeling that nothing you ever do will ever be good enough for anyone, in conjunction with the fact that even when people are talking to you straight to your face, they're not even being sincere. There's a point where there's a description of, you see somebody say in an ice cream shop that you never think about, you never talk about, they're not a part of your life, but you know them from, a mathematics class you took 3 years ago. It is socially required of you and expected of you to be like, oh my gosh, hi Jim.
How are you? How are the kids? How have you been doing?
Yet, you literally don't care. You don't care about Jim, you don't care about his kids, you don't care about his life. It's just something that is socially expected of you. And I feel like that is where a large part of this phoniness comes in, is what is expected of you as a person. And just having all of these societal pressures placed upon you while you're also trying to deal with the loss of somebody that you love and being, a angsty teenager and this and this and this and that and that. It is a lot to bear for one person. So while I understand all of those things, I found Holden Caulfield to be absolutely exhausting. I hated reading from his POV. It was just whiny. I found the writing all over the place. Think of that voice you have inside your head and it just talks and talks and talks and talks, but there's no periods in sight. I just felt like this book was one big ass run-on sentence, and that is the part that really made me dislike this book, was the main POV. I found him unbearably annoying. So again, while I found all of the meaning behind the story that the author was trying to portray, I absolutely could not stand the main character. His sister though, his little sister Phoebe, I loved seeing that sibling dynamic, because you can tell that he really and truly loves his sister in a very kind way. And I love always reading about sibling dynamics, so that was super fun for me to see that side of that character with his sister Phoebe. But anything outside of that, you're just like, what is happening? If you don't know, Holden Caulfield gets kicked out of his whatever 4th or 5th private school, and his rich parents are going to be super upset with him, so he gets kicked out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and he's like, oh well, the school probably isn't even going to send a letter until Thursday or Friday, and then probably isn't going to even get to my parents until Monday, so I have until then. I have a little freedom to just go roam around New York City and just do all these things. And the whole time he's doing that, he's complaining about God and everything. Just unbearably annoying. So that's really my gripe with the book. So I, at one point from a writing standpoint, understand, but then as a reader, I'm like, can this end? Please, Lord. I'm sorry, E. I know this is your favorite book of all time, but I'm happy for you. Don't get it twisted. I love you and I'm happy for you, but this was not for me. Thank you, Hamilton, for the input. So that wraps up my 10 books for January. I was really pleased with the books that I had read this month. I definitely read shorter books because I wanted to get back into the swing of reading. I hadn't read since August, so I wanted books that I could maybe not necessarily get through quickly, but stories that I could be wrapped up in an efficient manner to be like, okay, read that, now I want to read more. Okay, that story's over, now I want to read more. I didn't want to dedicate a large chunk of time to a big 700 or 800 page book because I knew it would take longer for me to get through it and then I may get discouraged on wanting to read more. Like right now, I'm reading A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. By the time you're watching this, I've probably finished it, but wow. This book has got me messed up. You will see this in my next wrap-up for February, but we'll talk about it then. But those were the 10 books that I read in January. I'm really hopeful for February and to see what I will read in this month. I am so loving the horror thriller genre right now. Please comment your favorite horror books. I would love to read them. I feel like I've really found my specific type of horror that I like. So definitely realistic horror, something that could potentially happen to any of us. So if you have any recommendations, leave them for me. I'd love to give them a go. I am super excited to tell you guys about the books that I'm going to be reading in February. And if you stick around, you will see a book haul that I'm posting soon. I just went and did a ton of book shopping. So I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.